A city with a building shaped like a giant bookshelf, plus a performing arts center that looks like the love child of the Walt Disney Concert Hall and the Sydney Opera House. Kansas City may not get the hype that some other cities around America get, but it can certainly hold its own when it comes to cool architecture and fascinating history. This was my weekend in the Paris of the Plains. There were a couple of places at the top of my list that I wanted to visit as soon as I got into Kansas City, none more so than the aforementioned mashup of the Disney Concert Hall and the Sydney Opera House, and that would be the Kaufman Performing Arts Center. And it certainly didn't disappoint. The $400 million project took 5 years to complete and opened in 2011. It took 25,000 yards of concrete and 40,000 square feet of window glass to build. The building houses two main concert halls, each with a capacity of around 1,700, and one of the most incredible aspects of this building is the cable-supported section, which actually moved by design several inches as the cables were getting their final tightening. From there, it was off to the World War I Memorial. This might be the most recognizable and impressive landmark in the city. It originally opened in 1926, making it just about to celebrate its 100th anniversary. Besides the Memorial Tower itself, one of my favorite parts about this stop was the view it provided. From this one spot, you get one of the best views of the Kansas City skyline, which isn't the biggest or the craziest, but it's still quite respectable and looks great from a distance. It has 3 towers over 500 feet, 9 over 400 feet, and 15 over 300 feet. But 2 buildings stood out in particular, one for a very positive reason and one for a fairly awful reason. First off, the good, the Kansas City Union Station. Like a lot of train stations built in the early 1900s, it looked awesome. It followed a similar historical arc to many other train stations around the country. It opened in the early 1900s, usage peaked in the 1940s towards the end of World War II, and then it declined substantially beginning in the 1950s. It closed in the 80s but was reopened 20 years later, and today it's undergone significant renovations and is once again being used for both Amtrak service and the Kansas City streetcar system. The other building that stood out from this particular perspective is for an awful reason, an awful part of Kansas City history, and that's the former Hyatt Regency Hotel. 41 years ago, it had one of the worst collapse incidents in America when elevated walkways in the multi-story lobby collapsed during a crowded social event. Over 100 people were killed and more than 200 were injured. A small silver lining, though, to this incident was a majorly increased emphasis on safety within the construction and engineering industries in the following years. The hotel is still in use today, but has been rebranded several times since the incident. So as I was walking around Kansas City, I was pretty impressed with what I was seeing, but I realized I didn't really know much about the city's history or why it was even there. Most of the places that I check out on this channel are in the Rust Belt, so typically the answer to the question, why is this place here, is heavy industry or some variation of that. But for Kansas City, things were a little bit different. Its location along the Missouri and Kansas rivers made it an important trading post, but perhaps even more pivotal was its location at the edge of the western frontier. For a while, it was one of the last major stops before travelers headed out west were essentially on their own. So it became a critical logistics hub. The California, Santa Fe, and Oregon trails all got their start right next door in Independence, Missouri. Then, as rail lines made their way west to Kansas City, it was transformed from a small trading post on the edge of the frontier to a critical transportation hub. Its location has helped it remain relevant in transportation, particularly for the agricultural industry. Now, one of the things that was really unique to me about Kansas City, particularly when compared to most of the places that I go for this channel, is that it's never really seen a prolonged economic and population downturn. While they did lose about 50,000 residents in the 1970s, the city bounced back and is bigger than ever as far as population goes. And even that 50,000 population loss in the 70s, that's hardly anything compared to a lot of American cities, like the more than 1 million residents lost by Detroit or the 500,000 lost by Baltimore. Throughout my day and my long walk around the city, one of the things that stood out was how clean and landscaped and vibrant the city felt, which really makes sense given the lack of these significant downturns over the years. The city has always been in reasonably good shape and has never really had significant portions of the city completely neglected for decades, like many of the Rust Belt cities have. Instead, Kansas felt much more tidy, with much less vacant space and much more well-maintained green spaces and a lot of fountains. Along these lines, according to the internet, Kansas City has some of the most tree-lined boulevards of any city in the world. Now, what exactly a boulevard is versus a street, I don't know, but according to Wikipedia, they were second to only Paris, which I guess is part of where the whole Paris of the Plains nickname comes from. As I headed north through downtown, I came across the hidden gem of the day when I made my way down to the River Market neighborhood. But before I get into that, I just want to ask everybody to consider subscribing. It's getting increasingly difficult to compete with the volume of AI-generated content. So if you like this channel and want to help it continue into the future, it would be really appreciated if you would subscribe. So back to the River Market District and the hidden gem of the day. There I went to the Steamboat Arabia Museum, which was definitely worth checking out. Long ago, steamboats were a critical piece of the transportation puzzle, able to transport huge amounts of people and cargo efficiently. Unfortunately, at the time, it was also sort of a risky way to travel. Steamboats regularly sunk all up and down the Missouri River. One of these massive steamboats that sunk was the Steamboat Arabia. After striking a submerged tree, the boat quickly sunk into the mud at the bottom of the river. No human lives were lost, but the salvage efforts on the 200 tons of cargo were unsuccessful. Then over the years, the path of the river slowly changed and the boat was buried by more and more silt. In 1980, a group of locals decided to see if they could find it. Using various detection technologies, they were able to locate where the boat was, and at this point, an astonishing half-mile from the modern-day path of the river, and unfortunately for them, covered in more than 40 feet of mud. They began a mammoth excavation effort and were eventually able to unearth the boat. And the contents were in remarkably good shape and preserved over the years by being packed in the mud. Today, the museum not only tells the history of that story, but also displays all the contents that were on the steamboat. The sheer volume of what's on display is astonishing. It's also wild to see how good of quality the items were from back in the 1800s. Everything from tools and clothes and shoes to building supplies. There's a little bit of everything. It almost feels like when you go in the museum, you're in a shopping mall. It's just that everything is 150 years old and not for sale. Side note about the River Market District. While the Steamboat Museum was really the only thing I did while I was down there, the River Market revitalization more broadly was pretty impressive to me as an outsider. The area that was once the site of a mob war was now bustling with families and people of all shapes and sizes on a Saturday morning while I was there. And while I'm not familiar with all the details of the revitalization that's going on, just from walking around, it seemed like development done right. Dense, walkable neighborhoods and stores and restaurants and attractions that appeal to a wide range of people. So now a few more spots that I found noteworthy. I'm just going to rapid fire them because I didn't get tons of time to check them out. The first one was community library with a very appropriate architectural theme. Besides a very obvious book-shaped exterior, they also added some more subtle touches, like the book-shaped front steps. Next up was one of my favorites, the New York Life Insurance Building, which at one point in time was the tallest building in the city. Even today, despite being surpassed in height by dozens of buildings all around the city, it still stands out as an architectural marvel. When it was completed in 1889, it was the city's tallest building, as well as the first with an elevator in it. It's had a ton of different tenants over the years, and despite multiple renovations, it still kept most of its original design and a lot of the same artwork that was there when it opened in 1889. Next up is the Kemper Arena, perhaps most notable for its major roof collapse in 1979. But despite this setback, the building was fixed and it saw significant use for all types of events over the years. But now it's no longer the main arena in the city now that the T-Mobile Center opened up, which is an arena down near the Power and Light District and has become the city's primary arena. The Power and Light District is one of the newest entertainment areas in the city, and it's built by Maryland-based developer the Cordish Companies. It's loosely modeled after other Cordish Companies developments like Power Plant Live in Baltimore. And these last three I didn't get a chance to actually visit, but I wish I would have. One of which was Country Club Plaza in an area south of downtown. It's one of the first car-centric planned suburban developments in the country, going all the way back to 1923. But unlike modern bland suburban developments covered in vinyl siding and mediocre building materials, this project featured more than 40 statues, fountains, and sculptures, along with a dozen towers. And finally, Subtropolis, which I'm kicking myself for not getting to because it seems like it's one of the coolest of all. It's a 55 million square foot underground business complex. Some say it's the largest of these in the world. It used to be a limestone mine, but is now used for a variety of other uses, including warehousing and storage. The subsurface conditions are very favorable for a number of applications because it's naturally protected from the elements and kept at a stable temperature. The complex is so big that there's more than 10 miles of underground roads. And one other thing that I thought it was interesting to learn about and sort of unexpected based on what Kansas City looks like to an outsider just walking around, and that was a history of crime and violence in the city of Kansas City. Going way back to its early days as a frontier town, Kansas City started to develop a reputation for violence. This started within years of its founding, but really began to take hold during the Bleeding Kansas incidents, a series of violent clashes between pro- and anti-slavery groups in Kansas and western Missouri in the years leading up to the Civil War. But it would continue from there. Kansas City local Jesse James helped solidify this reputation as he went on his infamous crime spree following the Civil War. Then in the 1900s, organized crime began to really take hold. Notorious political boss Tom Pendergast openly allied himself with organized crime. He was once described in the following way. Pendergast made bare comparison to various big city bosses, but his open alliance with hardened criminals, his cynical subversion of the democratic process, his monarchistic style of living, his increasingly insatiable gambling habit, his grasping for a business empire, and his promotion of Kansas City as a wide-open town with every kind of vice imaginable, combined with his professed compassion for the poor and very real role as a city builder, made him bigger than life, difficult to characterize. So, needless to say, Pendergast was an unusual character, but he didn't really do much to improve Kansas City's questionable image as far as crime went. The role that organized crime would play in Kansas City would remain significant for decades after Pendergast, though. The Kansas City Mafia has been active since 1912 and has been at the center of a number of crimes from extortion to murder. The Robert De Niro movie Casino was even based in part on some of the activities of the Kansas City mob. Even today, despite its tidy appearance and its bustling entertainment districts, Kansas City still has a little bit of a crime problem. While most publications that I've seen rank it around 15 in the country for most dangerous cities, some recently have put it inside the top 10. So that was Kansas City. Fascinating place with cool buildings and a wild history. If you're from Kansas City, did I miss anywhere? Let me know in the comments where I should go if and when I go back. Thanks for watching.